Welcome, my friends. This is Mike Williams of the Sage Aquay Radio Hour, and I recently had the opportunity to join Sofia Smallstorm on her podcast to talk about how hypnosis and hypnotic techniques are utilized by the mass media to manipulate the masses. This show, as well as Sofia's other podcasts, can be found by heading over to Sofia's website at www.aboutthe.sky/podcasts. So without further ado, here's the interview. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, this is Sofia Smallstorm. I'm doing another one of my little podcasts, and they can be found at www.abouttthesky.com/podcast. There's a podcast tab, and I am now, I think, into my 6th or 7th one. Today I have a very, very deep and wise individual that I met by going on his broadcast. He is known as the Sage of Quay. I wonder if I'm saying it right. And it's a curious name. His real name is Michael Williams, and it turns out he is a hypnotherapist, and he has varied activities in his background. But I was very impressed by Mike's personality and the very you could say collected, calm way that he is facing the world today. Let me introduce him, and he can tell you a little bit about himself. Hi, Mike, and welcome to my little show.
Hello, Sophia, and thank you for having me on your little show. It's an honor. You did say Sage Aquay correctly. That's my blog, and then I have this alter ego where I am a professional master hypnotherapist, and I practice out of North Carolina.
So how did that all come your way, hypnotherapy? Can you tell us?
Well, back in 2009, I had decided to go to my own hypnosis session, and I was very interested in past life regression. And so I went and had my own past life regression session, and after I came out of that session, which was basically 2 days, it was a past life and then a between life session, I decided that this is the type of work I want to do. I was very, very intrigued by it. In fact, I was fascinated by it. So it was soon after that I went and got my training, got myself certified, and then I consumed everything I possibly could on hypnosis, on past lives, on clinical hypnosis. As you know, I have studied Milton Erickson, and so it's just kind of a snowball effect, if you will. I just kept going and going, and today it's 5 years later, and the practice is doing very well. It's very healthy, and I love doing it.
Well, I don't want to pry, but can you tell us anything about your 2 days of regression work that was the hook, right?
That was the hook. What happened was I was always intrigued by things like near-death experience, paranormal, and I hate to use the word paranormal because it conjures up thoughts of ghosts and stuff like that, but I always knew, even from a very early age in my life, that there was a lot more to reality than what we were told and what we were taught. And so back in 2009, I was looking for a book on near-death experience. I was looking for a good book on it. It's hard to find a good book. There was when I did the search in Amazon, they popped up with, hey, you might like this one. And it was Memories of the Afterlife. That's the name of the book, and it was by Michael Newton. And I didn't know who Michael Newton was. It was a pre-order. So I ordered the book. It came a couple of weeks later. It wasn't about near-death experience. It was about past life regression. And Dr. Michael Newton had performed 7,000 case studies to essentially formulate his position and his theories on past lives and how the spirit world works and so on. And I read the book probably in 3 days. And this particular book, I think there's 4 books out. This particular book is 32 case studies that are presented. And it was just mind-boggling to me. It connected all my dots. And it was soon after I read that book, I said, you know what? I need to have one of these sessions because this just seems unbelievable to me. And then when I had my session, it was unbelievable. It just, going back and the memories, how lucid it was, how free-flowing. it was just an amazing experience. And so from that point on, I decided I was going to do this type of work.
So the mind then is this very pliable, very immense thing, you could say, right? That's an
Y-
understatement.
yes,
And where the mind can go, time apparently is not any kind of limitation on the mind once you get into the mind, right?
that's right. Time is something that is a creation of what we experience here in this dimension, what a lot of people call the third dimension on Earth. Time is very linear here. Outside of this dimension and any other places in creation where they have linear time, time is doesn't exist. It's just past, present, and future are right now.
Mm. Well, so hypnosis was the way that you went into the past life regression. I'm
Yes.
just trying to make it a little linear for the people listening.
Right. What happened was I wanted to become a past life regressionist. But to become a past life regressionist, you have to become a hypnotist. So which means you have to get yourself trained and certified in basic and advanced hypnotherapy techniques, hypnosis techniques. From there, what happens is then you need to progress to the next certification, which is regression. And regression itself does not mean past life regression, because even in clinical settings, regression is used many, many times to go back to the root cause, or what we call the initial sensitizing event, when somebody comes in to try to resolve conflict. So you get your training in basic and advanced, then you move to your certification in regression, and then from there, once you get some experience under your belt, if you desire to do this, some hypnotists do not do this, you can go get your certifications in and your training in past lives and between lives.
So who certifies and trains?
Well, that's a very good question. There are schools out across the country. Some of the schools are large, some of the schools are small. In my particular case, I have a colleague of mine who was actually one of the founding members of the Newton Institute, Bryn Blankenship. Bryn has a school along with her practice. She's very, very experienced, highly recommended. And I took Bryn's course, which is a terrific course because it's hands-on. We do in-class experiential work. And in fact, today, I actually co-instruct with her for the basic, advanced, and the regression classes.
So is there accreditation or what's the standard? Is there any?
Well, it's a little fluid. I'll try to explain it the best I can. I'll use North Carolina as an example. North Carolina does not have there's no license to become a hypnotherapist. It's self-regulating, which means that you get your certifications, and then your certifications come from, or they should come from, major associations, hypnosis associations, like the International Association of Counselors and Therapists, which is called IACT, or the National Guild of Hypnotists, NGH. Those are the two I belong to. They're not the only two, there are others. And so when you get your certification from, as an example, the IACT or the NGH, they review who your instructor is, the class, the material, the number of hours, and so on. And that's how you receive your certification. And then you have to do credits during each year to make sure that you retain your standing with each one of those associations. So you just can't apply, do nothing, and just claim to call yourself a hypnotherapist forevermore. In other words, you have to continue to work on it.
You know, what I went through with you is a series of emails recently during which you kind of explained to me in a patchwork form, because these were just emails, the whole effect of the hypnotic effect of television on the viewer. And that has been eye-opening for me. I came to some new connections myself that I had never seen before, and it was from your emails. And I strung them together in a way that I was able to include really a little essay on television hypnosis, or hypnosis by television. I don't know if there's a term for that, in a recent newsletter, which I think I'm going to have to post now that I'm doing this show with you. But it was amazing. So that's when I realized that you really had a handle on the pieces of, I don't even know what to call it, science or something, that comprise this whole state of hypnotism, which is very nebulous. I mean, I'll just tell you a quick little story from my life. I was an editor or book doctor for many years, and I met a woman who had a book that she wanted to publish, and she couldn't get an agent. And so my job was always to look at the client's manuscript and figure out why it wasn't hanging together properly and where it was weak, and then give them some direction, help them rewrite it. And then they sometimes could get representation, and sometimes they could get published. But anyway, so she offered me a trade, which I was never crazy about, but she gave me a list of things that she was qualified to do. And there were about 75 things on this list. She was an MFCC, and so she could do counseling, and she could do, oh my gosh, psychic readings, and I think she was even a sex surrogate, and she could do past life regressions. And I mean, there were so many things on this list. I read over the list, and then I told her, all right, I'll do a trade. I'll look at your book proposal, and you can do a past life regression on me, because the proposal wasn't that long, or I'll read a chapter or two of your book. So I told a friend of mine, and he flipped out. He said, Sophia, you are going to give her your amazing high-quality editing and insights, and she's going to tell you about your past lives?
Yeah.
And in spite of his yelling, I said, I'm going anyway. And it was very interesting. It didn't prompt me to rush and get certification, but I will tell you, anyone who does this, I think if it can be affected at all on you, you're going to see some very interesting stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is, Sophia, you have to make sure, and this is for the audience, that when you go to seek out a past life regression, make sure you go to somebody who is experienced and skilled and knows what they're doing. It's very important. The reason why I say that, I'm not saying the person that did it for you was not. I'm just saying, generally speaking, there's a lot of folks out there that are claiming to do this work, and quite honestly, they're not very good at it. They don't have the skill and the experience. They're doing it basically as a hobby, if you will. And what's going to happen is clients that go to these folks, they're going to wind up with a sub-optimized session and maybe a sour taste in their mouth about really what it's all about. But in reality, there is a science behind it. And for those of us that are experienced and skilled in it, our clients have great experiences.
Well, I'm glad you're there. I'm sorry that you can't be in every city in every state, but at least you can, you'd like to do the face-to-face work, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us why that's important, and then we'll go into the big topic that I want to discuss.
Well, I do the face-to-face because there's essentially different types of approaches. The first approach that many hypnotists engage in is what is called direct suggestion. And this is where the practitioner verbalizes direct suggestion to the client while the client is under hypnosis. And direct suggestion are things like, you will not smoke, you will release weight, etc. Typically, these types of sessions are primarily done by reading scripts. There's limited or no client feedback during the session. In other words, the practitioner is not getting feedback from the client. There's no corresponding. And so when that happens, we have a downside, because when you're not getting feedback from the client, you're not understanding whether the unconscious mind is accepting or rejecting the suggestions, because the unconscious mind can reject suggestion. A lot of people don't realize this. A lot of hypnotists don't realize this. They just believe if you just keep on saying it, that eventually it's going to take, and that is not necessarily true. Now, the reason why I don't do Skype sessions or remote sessions and I do everything one-on-one is because, number one, you really need to have a controlled environment. I can't control the environment if somebody's in their house and, they have a dog and kids and so on. The doorbell rings, the phone rings. That's just not going to work. The second piece, and probably the most important, is because my hypnosis is what I refer to as interactive hypnosis, where the client and myself engage in dialogue. And it involves exercises, and I call them exercises, which means creating active imagery at the time of the session for the client, visualization. I use neuro-linguistic programming techniques like the swish pattern and remapping. There are other techniques like desensitizing, parts therapy, and so on. But when I do these exercises, there is a lot of dialogue, and a client can speak when they're in trance, going back and forth. And the upside to having that happen is the practitioner is able to gauge and understand whether the client, their unconscious mind, is accepting these suggestions or accepting this work and attempting to make the change or shift, the positive change and shift. Because all clients come in, they want to resolve conflict. I have stress, I have fears, I have phobias, and so on. You want to resolve that conflict. Also, many times during these sessions, clients will have what we refer to as an emotional release. It's also referred to as an abreaction, which means a client may they may start to cry, have some kind of emotional aspect that emerges. And from the perspective of a practitioner, this is good. Now, some hypnotists run away from this. They see an emotional reaction and like, oh, this is not what we want. We're going to shut this session down. But that's not what you should be doing, because when the emotion emerges, what that means is you are at the root of the problem, the root of the conflict. And just by a client being in an emotional state, that in itself is a trance state. So you want to be able to maximize and leverage that in order to help the client.
So, what is trance? Can you define it, explain it? Is there anything mystifying or mystical about trance? Is it something special?
No, that's a very good question. And I say to my clients, and even when I do lectures, in fact, I just did a lecture a couple of weeks ago, hypnosis is a trance state, and it's not magical and it's not mystical. And trance basically means this. There are 4 states. There is beta state, which is your conscious state. That's 13 to 40 hertz. Right now, you and I are in our conscious state, so we're operating in beta. Alpha is the next step lower. That's 7 to 12 hertz. That's where you would have your relaxation, your visualization, your creativity. And then below that is theta. It's Theta. And that's 4 to 7 hertz. And when you're doing hypnosis, you can get work done in alpha, 7 to 12. It has to be deep alpha, but you really want your clients in theta, because theta is a very deep state. That's where you can do your spiritual regressions, deep meditations. That's where you can retrieve memories. And then the next brainwave state is delta, and that's your sleep state. That's 0 to 4 hertz. So that's it. When we talk about trance, we're really talking about 4 levels of brainwave functioning: beta, alpha, theta, and delta. That's all it is. And from a hypnotist perspective, you really want to get your clients into at least very deep alpha, but optimally, you want to get them into theta state.
Well, I'm writing all that down. It's very, very interesting. So where can you make changes in theta? That's where you can change like somebody's programmed, reflexive, instinctive response to something.
That's the state where you're going to have the highest rate of success in theta. You can do it in alpha, but it has to be a deep alpha state. Remember, the range in alpha is 7 to 12. So if you're pushing 7 to 8 hertz, that's a deep alpha state. You can do work there. In fact, I have clients, some clients just are not able to stay in theta state. They'll just pop up and they'll kind of hover the fence between alpha and theta. And I do work with them, and they've done very well. But even when I instruct and I talk to students and even my clients, I'll tell them the deeper the better. Plain and simple. That's a fact. The deeper the better.
I've seen comedy hypnosis a few times on stage, and when the hypnotist says sleep and the person just kind of keels over, often the hypnotist has to catch the person. What state is that?
Well, that's probably in a theta state. And let me just explain that. Stage hypnosis is very interesting. I kind of stay away from it, and I shouldn't say this because a lot of stage hypnotists are going to get upset with me, but I don't take it very seriously. One of the reasons is because I do believe hypnosis should be used to be able to help clients resolve conflict. The stage aspect of it gives hypnosis a bad name. It really does. And we have to battle that. Those of us that are out there who have practices and, and really doing real healing and wellness work with our clients, it just kind of makes us shiver when we talk about stage hypnosis. But the thing, Sophia, with stage hypnosis is the stage hypnotist is very good at being able to vet and weed out those in the audience that are not good candidates. As the stage hypnosis is speaking, he himself, along with some aides that he has, are looking at the audience and taking a look at telltale signs that somebody is easily suggestible because they are already in a trance. You just watch their eyes, you watch their body movements. The eyes tend to get a glassy look to it. There's kind of this stare. And so what they're doing is they're weeding through and they're picking the prime candidates to bring up on stage. So what you're seeing when you see stage hypnosis is you're seeing folks that are highly suggestible. They have been handpicked. They have been vetted to be brought up on the stage. This is why sometimes even in stage acts, once they have, let's say, 5 or 6 people up there, you'll see a hypnotist kind of let some people go. Oh, you did a great job, Dave. You did a great job, Sue. Kind of pat him on the back. That's because the stage hypnotist understands that these 2 folks, Dave and Sue, even though they were picked to come up on stage, they're not going to work out. So we're going to just kind of move them aside, and we're going to keep the prime candidates up on stage so that, we can have a show.
So how are people in the audience already in trance?
Well, it's by what the stage hypnotist is saying. Maybe he's got some visuals behind him, some stuff being projected. It could be lights. It could be just a lot of stuff, a lot of stimulus that's going on, and they could pick that up.
Maybe even it could be just the state of being a passive person in the audience. Because, this is where I'm going to move into this television subject. When you're just sitting there and you're taking things in, you're really not very active. You could be attentive, but alternately, you can also be kind of, zoned out.
Exactly.
Maybe tired or just taking it in, and that might be a less your brain isn't interacting with the information particularly, right?
Well, that happens. See, people go in and out of trance all day, Sophia. Your example that you just used is very good. Let's just look at it from the aspect, let's say you're reading a book. How many times have you read a book and you're thinking to yourself, I'm really paying attention to this book. And then you get through a page and you're thinking to yourself, you know what? I don't really remember reading what I think I just read. You have to go back and read it again.
Right.
Right? Because
that's trance, huh?
It's trance. You're in a trance loop.
And what if you were thinking of something else? Because I do that. I'll be reading and then my mind will be thinking about something else. And I realize, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be reading, so I have to reread that paragraph.
Yeah, you're in a trance. You got yourself
Even though you're thinking about something else, that's trance too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you're not in the present, when your mind is preoccupied, that's really trance.
Yes.
Okay, so now we have the definition. So then there's deep trance, right? Which is when the mind is not as preoccupied. It's not moving with ideas. It's in its quiet mode. But that's also trance, like this theta or alpha.
Right, that's right.
Really what you've described in beta, alpha, theta, and delta are stages of consciousness. And when you're in beta, that's conscious, that's the fully conscious state, but you're preoccupied. That's really the first level of trance.
Right. So even in your conscious state, I mean, we're awake, we're aware. That doesn't mean that you're not going to slip in and out of trance during the course of the day. I mean, you could be, fully conscious, but you're sitting at a coffee shop somewhere and you start to think about something, you start to daydream, you just slipped into a trance. And then you bring yourself out because like, oh, I've got to go shopping, right? So you get yourself back into your car and you go shopping. So that's the thing. We go in and out all day long, all the time. When folks ask me, like, what is hypnosis? I tell them from a therapeutic perspective, hypnosis is a profound state of relaxation. It's focused mind, concentration, and heightened sensory awareness. And this is when we're talking about getting into the deeper states you mentioned before. So when we go into trance state, when we go into the deeper states, what happens is the conscious mind takes a step back and it defers to your unconscious as you tune out most of the stimuli that's around you. And the client focuses very intently on the subject at hand to the near exclusion of any other thought. And this is when you're in deep trance. And this is why hypnosis is very effective in helping to resolve conflicts in many areas, is because you're getting the conscious mind out of the way. Your conscious mind is your gatekeeper. It's your logic, it's your rationale. And once you can get the conscious mind just to step back, just take a back seat in the car. You're not going to drive now. We're going to have the unconscious mind drive. And you can get a lot of work done. Now, the thing is, when we talk about hypnosis from a therapeutic perspective, It's very important to understand for potential clients or anybody who's interested in giving hypnosis a shot. You cannot be made to do anything you do not truly desire to do, or anything which violates your moral or religious convictions. And I stand by that because I have been a client myself. I've been in the chair. Your ability to go into trance and to work with a hypnotist is your openness to want to engage in that process. To the extent that you do not want to be hypnotized, you won't be hypnotized. Because people will say to me sometimes, they'll find out that I'm a hypnotherapist and they'll say, I'll bet you can't hypnotize me. And I'll tell them, I'll bet you're right. Because if you don't want to be hypnotized, you're not going to go there.
Hmm. So when we're in front of a TV, I want to know how the agreement works. The fact that we sit down in front of the TV, the fact that we own one, we turn it on, we give ourselves to it for
Right.
however long, 5 minutes or 5 hours. So then we're in participation with the program, right?
Exactly. I mean, the agreement is that you turn on your television set, you want to watch TV. You want to watch Fox News or CNN, or you want to watch your favorite reality TV show. So there's the agreement right there. You just voluntarily sit in front of the TV, turn it on, and you watch.
And then there's everyone who uses it as background, which is
Right.
most of America. They've got them going all the time.
Yep. Exactly.
So, can you explain, now that we understand what trance is, this confusion technique that the television also uses?
The confusion technique is a technique that was accredited to Milton Erickson. Although, as I'd mentioned in my email to you, that Erickson just figured out that confusion was a way to induce trance. And what confusion does is it gets the conscious mind to essentially give up or relinquish its control as the prominent state of consciousness. So by creating confusion, the conscious mind basically says, oh, I really don't want to deal with this anymore. So it takes a step back. And when that happens, you've just induced trance now. And the client is now in a trance loop. And that's what the confusion technique, that's how it works.
Well, let me add something here because I just hit on this and it's expanded something in my grasp of how I work and how life works. When I read a book that's dense or difficult to follow, I go into trance because it's confusing. It's the book, the way it's written, the way that page is written is confusion technique.
Yes.
And that's why I drift away and I start thinking about other things. And then I turn the page and I say, wait, what was on that page? I have to reread it. And even if I try to reread it, I'll slip away again because it is confusing. Now I understand.
Right, because the confusion technique, it tires the conscious mind and induces trance. That's it in a nutshell. And it's very effective from a hypnotherapist perspective when we're dealing with and working with analytical type of clients.
Mm-hmm.
Because analytical clients typically don't take to the as well to the guided imagery, not all the time, but they're not really apt to kind of grasp onto that. Other clients are. So in order to get an analytical type into trance, what you have to do is you have to tire the conscious mind and get them to go into trance that way. And that's the confusion technique.
So how does television use confusion technique?
Television uses it by constantly bombarding the person who's watching with all kinds of imagery, with all kinds of words. It's the lighting, it's the presentation. It's just a barrage of stimuli that is coming into the person that's watching it. And this bombardment is what essentially gets the conscious mind to say, oh, I can't handle all this. I can't handle all this input. So I'm just going to take a step back. I'm going to take a back seat. I'm going to relax. I'm going to relinquish my primary role. And there you go. And that's how the trance state begins.
So it's really, I would say television is discombobulated. It's interrupting itself all the time. There's too much happening. It's too fast. Even the commercials are super fast and they're all different and they just are, you know, stacked on one another. And sometimes they don't even end completely. And they're louder than the normal show that you're watching. And
Exactly.
there's just, I termed it a kaleidoscope in my newsletter when I kind of covered your emails in the very interesting way that all this got connected for me. It's this swirling, tumbling material that has sound and tempo and mood continually changing. And the reality is that that kaleidoscope is in other hands. It's not in your hands.
That's right.
So we know we're not in control, and this irritates the conscious mind, and the conscious mind just says, okay, that's it, I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. And then it induces that trance state. You know, as I mentioned to you, Sophia, when we were trading the emails, is the unconscious mind loves imagery.
Right.
And, you know, imagination is the language of the unconscious mind. And
when the unconscious mind takes off, then you can relax.
right, people will say, look, I'm going to turn the television on. I'm going to relax.
Right.
Right.
So you have your unconscious mind now popping up. It's like Alice in Wonderland because there's all this imagery, and it loves imagery. It's drinking it all up.
Yes.
And it also loves, I say, nonsensical ways of putting things together, you know. It's very creative. So when it sees discombobulated things, most of which are pretty and there's music and everything, it's in, you know, that's its heyday.
Right. And if we take the example of, let's say, cable news, many people have seen this, and they probably don't even realize it as they're watching it. But those of us that are aware, I see it all the time, and I just kind of chuckle to myself. But we'll see the same video image played over and over again. It's looped, you know, and sometimes you would watch cable news and you think to yourself, is that the only footage they have?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's the only footage they're going to show you, and they're going to put it in a loop, and they're going to play it over and over again with spoken words from the reporter, the quote unquote, the reporter. And then on top of that, we have the screen text that's coordinated with the words and the images. So that's why you'll see the words war, terror, shooting flash up on the screen. These are the words that are popping up. This is direct suggestion. Plus, you have the reporter sitting there talking about war and terror and shooting. So you have the hypnotic word imagery association. And then repetition is critical to imposing the condition. And this is why it gets played over and over and over again. This is why cable news is now 24/7. That was not by accident. That wasn't because they have all this news to report. It's so that they can, you know, anytime somebody turns on the news, you work the day shift, the night shift, or whatever, the hypnotic box is always available.
So you called it a perpetual motion machine, the TV.
Yes.
And they sync up these images and words, and then they also run these ticker tapes and other things on the screen at the same time.
Yes.
Which is more, what did you call that? Eye fatigue?
Yeah, it's eye fatigue. So if you watch, as an example, the major cable news networks, you'll see spinning logos at the bottom of the screen, usually in the corner. And then people start to watch that spinning. It's no different than the hypnotist using that circle that goes round and round. You're getting sleepy. Well, it's spinning round and round. And then you have the ticker at the bottom of the screen that's either giving some kind of news that you really can't read because it's going by at a rate and pace. If you've ever noticed, try reading that and listening to what the person is saying on the television. Most people cannot. And that's another confusion technique. They're trying to read the ticker and listen to what's going on. And people find it very difficult to do. So therefore, the conscious mind relinquishes. It's like when we talk about eye fatigue, Sophia, it's the same thing as when people watch a flickering candle.
Right.
Or if you watch a fire in a fireplace, how many times have you sat in front of a fireplace, got a nice comfortable chair, and you've said, I love sitting in front of the fireplace because it just relaxes me.
Right. It's like the waves breaking at the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
It's constant, it's varied, and it's repetitive. Natural even. So this is like a machine analog of that, right?
Yes, that's right. Now, the other thing, too, that we probably should talk about with the audience is it's not just the words and the imagery, but it's also the use of, and I didn't talk about this in my emails, but it's also the use of colors. And red and blue is very, very prominent. So when why is that? Well, when you watch, let's just take Fox News as an example. They're very, very good at weaving in the reds and the blues. So red is associated with power, aggression, winning. It's a warning, high alert, fight or flight. And, fight or flight, that impacts your critical thinking. There's whole lot of critical thinking going on when you're thinking about either fighting or getting out. Red tells you to pay attention, to stop. It's also sexual arousal, right? So they have the whole red thing going on, and then they also introduce the blues. So this is another confusion technique that they use. The blue is associated with cool, calm, safety, open spaces. As an example, the sky is blue, the ocean is blue. Those are the open spaces. Blue is associated with waking up. The color blue represses melatonin. It's also, blue is associated with better memory, and it's also associated with generosity. This is why many times you'll see places like Walmart, the store is essentially blue. The reason why it's blue is because it's associated with generosity, people opening up. Hey, go spend your money. Come to the big blue building and
Did you
buy our
say
stuff.
blue represses melatonin? I thought melatonin is something you want.
The studies that I have seen say that the color blue is associated with essentially repressing melatonin, which basically says wakes you up, makes you alert.
Oh, I see.
You
Makes you
see?
open up.
Makes you open up, right?
Okay.
Right now, and so what you're seeing is, and I know you're probably picturing this in your head if watching some of these cable news outlets. Just picture how many times you're seeing reds and blues. It's all over the place.
Right. And I've always wondered about that, even if as you recollect your experiences watching TV, you see in your mind's eye a bunch of red and blue.
Right, right. And what you'll see is if a certain piece within the news program decides that it wants to calm you down, you're going to see mostly a blue set. You may even see the anchor or the reporter wearing a blue tie, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? So yeah, so you're going to see that. So if it's a piece where, hey, we want you to relax, we want you just to kind of calm down, and you're going to see a lot of blues. If it's something where they want you to be on alert, ISIS or whatever the new terror thing is for the day, you're going to see a lot of red. You're going to be bombarded with a lot of red.
And then they also mix it up for confusion purposes.
Yep, then they mix it up for confusion purposes. Right. On alert, calm, calm, alert. I feel safe. No, I don't. That's what's going on also.
So now is a good time to bring in this defense mechanism part of ourselves, which is all about survival. So when we see this red and blue, aggression, anger, pay attention, it doesn't that kind of fire up our preservation instinct and defense mechanism?
Yes, it does. I mean, for most people, it should, but I think for other people, maybe not. I think some people are so programmed and so far gone that they've almost in a state of almost catatonic when they're sitting in front of the television set.
Right, but I'm talking about the unconscious. Buried in us is this survival mechanism. And so when we're very confused and we don't know what's going on and the television is telling us there's all this danger out there, then our desire to leave with at least something that helps our defense mechanism, our desire to survive. So that's why we start collecting these directives in us that are that's their programming. Trust
Yes,
in the government.
yes,
We'll keep you safe. So your defense mechanism is alerted because of the confusion they've created and the danger they're talking about. And so you absorb their message, which is trust us. We'll help you.
no, I see where you're going with that. That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
So whether you're turned off, zombied out or not because of the overall social engineering, each time you plant yourself in front of the TV, you are actually feeding your survival mechanism with their programming.
Yes,
Yeah, that's what I thought was very interesting, that we actually have this. It's not completely dead in us. It's part of almost like breathing. We all breathe. Not all of us do deep belly breathing and full breathing and, proper breathing, but we breathe. And so we all have this defense mechanism, and that is readily fed by our participation in their technologies.
right. And what happens, Sophia, when people disconnect from the TV? Their critical thinking comes back, their free thinking comes back, because they have moved themselves away from what I referred to before as a perpetual motion machine,
Right.
right? So you can break from it. It's not like, they have you hook, line, and sinker. They do if you're going to continue to watch it. But if you take a step back and you pull the plug on it, then you start to come back.
Well, what if you watch it not, constantly, but occasionally in a critical mode? You're searching it for its messages and its tricks. I know a lot of people who do that. I do that myself.
I do that too. I think that when you are aware of what it is that they're doing, then the tricks don't work.
Right. Now, they do work on people because the integration of all this suggestion, you called that anchoring, didn't you?
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Well, anchoring is when the unconscious mind essentially accepts a suggestion. That's what it believes. That's what it acts on. Essentially, think of your unconscious mind as like a hard drive. And the anchoring is the file that gets written to the hard drive, right? So,
Hmm.
and that's how that works. And there's lots of anchoring that goes on all the time. And anchoring doesn't mean that, somebody has to touch you. Anchoring it could just be brought about by the constant barrage and the repetition. It just anchors.
So anchoring is your integration, your internal integration of these prompts.
Yes, essentially accepting the suggestion.
And then that's why these people are called anchors, the ones that talk on the television set.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. And the fact that they're attractive and they're, likable, and so they're selected because I think traditionally it is said that we don't like lopsided faces and personalities as much as we like the more symmetrical face, right? That's what
Right.
beauty is. It's symmetry, really.
Yep.
So they pick these people because we're going to naturally gravitate to the way they look, and that makes us even more susceptible to what they're saying, you know, just not even counting all the other tricks that they're using.
And notice how many times the ladies that are on these news networks, now that I'm telling everybody this, notice their attire, notice the reds and blues.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, even down to the makeup. The makeup is always, that's another thing. They tell you the makeup is for the lights, but I think they have this, it's almost like an orgasmic flush on everybody's face.
Well, that's because red is associated with sexual arousal.
Yeah,
Red fingernail polish that women wear. I mean, it's been shown psychologically has an effect on a man. A man sees red, and psychologically, he's thinking in terms of intimacy and sexual thoughts.
yeah. Well, in the 60s, there was that phase when they had, very silvery nail polish and lipstick, and I guess it didn't do anything for anyone, so they switched it all back.
Yeah, back to red.
But the other revelation I came to, the sort of new thing that I landed on after getting this email exchange from you and piecing it all together was when you were talking about how, as an activist, which you are, and that's why you have your radio program, Sage of Quay, SAGE of QUAY. That's what it is for people. I'll link it in my description. But you said that you see it all the time when you talk to people, regular people. You try to tell them about chemtrails, which I guess they have where you are all the time,
Yes.
and they just shut down. And as I processed all of the stuff you were teaching me in these emails, I realized that what happens to us activists when we get out there and we encounter someone in the store or a neighbor or even a family member who isn't awake, and we start explaining to them about something, some, deception, they shut down, and it hit me that they're shutting down because we're using the keywords that they've been programmed by on television. So when you say 9/11, it wasn't Arab hijackers, you're using all the key words that they've already been programmed by, and that programming is too deep. And those words trigger the shutdown of their conscious mind, so they can't even hear you.
That's exactly right. So what's happened is those words have been preempted and commandeered.
Exactly.
So when
Yeah.
somebody talks about 9/11, if you and I bring up 9/11 and we say September 11th, well, the person we're speaking to, if they're not awake, they immediately go to what it is that has been the file that's been written to their unconscious mind about 9/11. It's about Islamic radical terrorists. It's about airplanes. It's about all that stuff. So we start talking to them, and now what we're saying is not making any sense. So they shut
Right.
down.
Yeah, because they've hitchhiked with the television set, and that's where
Yes.
they're getting their ride. So they're not interested in what you're saying. They can't hear it because you are inadvertently, without realizing it, using all the trigger words that they've already been fully programmed with.
Well, that would be like somebody saying to you, Sophia, your name is Jane. And you're like, my name is Sophia. No, no, you're Jane. You're really Jane. And you're going to look at them and say, you're crazy. My name is Sophia. I've always been Sophia.
Hmm.
So it's along those lines. That's how it works.
Yeah, that spot in your hard drive has a file in it.
Yes.
So what about chemtrails? I mean, not the average person doesn't know the word chemtrails. So when I mention that word, if I do, I mean, now I'm more apt to say geoengineering, which is the parlance that everyone is using, or artificial weather. But if you say chemtrails, people haven't heard that before. It's not on television particularly. So what happens there? What has been co-opted as you try to explain that the lines in the sky don't come from contrails?
Well, there's a couple things going on there. The first thing, it's been co-opted because people have been taught to believe that the government would never do something like that, even though there's plenty of proof that the government does do stuff like that and has for a very long time, right? But they have been taught and told that it doesn't happen. The other thing is it's not presented. It's not shown on the news, so therefore it doesn't exist. Because surely if this was something that we needed to be worried about, Sean Hannity would be talking about it, right? So you got that whole dynamic going on. But then also, we have this other aspect, Sophia, which kicks into play, which is creates the apathy. I don't care. I have other things to worry about. It's the stuff that people are ingesting into their body. It's the aspartame, it's the fluoride, it's the vaccines, it's the flu shots, it's the GMOs. It's all working together. The mind control is a lot easier when you're able to induce the mind and body to be apathetic. So you've got that dynamic going on also.
Right, or put the body into a perpetual crisis mode on the cellular level. That's where
Exactly.
I think we're very, very challenged in that way. So we're not open to new information because we have information saturation, really. And though the other things, I think people are very stressed out. They're constantly worried about their jobs and their
Yes.
money and the whole culture here in America, particularly where people are very materialistic and encouraged to be so, and they're very competitive. They also want a new car because their neighbor got one. So the whole way of being is much more frenetic and fragmented and how do I say it? It's almost like broken into all these pieces. It's hard and it's not fluid. It's not open. It's not receptive. It's closed and it's distressed. Really, is what I want to say.
Yes. And the thing is, and you know this, it's the fear factor. Fear is imposed as much as it can throughout the society because when you're living fearful, whether you even know it or not, because and many people they don't even realize it. They just kind of have assimilated the fear, and it's just the way my life is. I work 65 hours a week. I've got 3 kids. 2 of them are going to college. But the fear aspect just sits there, and when you have fear, you do not critically think. You're in react mode, and this is how they want people to be in fear induced and just react. We don't want you to critical think. We don't want you to free think. Don't do that. So we want you to react. And if we get a chance, what I'd like to do is just to cover a little bit, Sophia, about mind control not being hypnosis. But when we get there, I'd like to just to chat about that.
Oh, we can do that right now.
Okay. Well, the reason why I want to bring it up is because, I do talk about the mind control aspects, and I am a hypnotherapist, but I also want to make it clear that hypnosis is not mind control and mind control is not hypnosis. Hypnosis is just one tool in the mind control toolbox. And this is very important to understand because many times, if you're watching TV shows or documentaries or people are writing blogs or articles on the internet, they will use the word hypnosis and mind control interchangeably, and it's completely wrong. When we talk about mind control, we're talking about brainwashing, which leads to a new identity. We're talking about mind control programs like MK Ultra, Project Bluebird. These are programs that are designed to create brainwashing and new identity. And the objective is to reprogram and repattern the mind. So essentially wipe the mind. And to wipe the mind, what they used and what they probably still do to this day is they inflict pain, there's electric shock, sensory deprivation, there's isolation, there's threats, physical and emotional trauma. The use of drugs is very important, like LSD and mescaline, scopolamine. Scopolamine inhibits memory formation. And then once they get all that done, once they break down the mind, essentially just kind of clean sheet it, wipe it, then they can utilize hypnosis as one of the tools in the toolbox to be able to reprogram and start to shape whatever it is they're trying to do with this person's mind. And, not to get too in depth with this discussion, I would recommend that the audience research you and Cameron's work for MK Ultra, where he was doing depattern and repattern experiments. And interestingly enough, Cameron was the president of the Canadian, American, and World Psychiatric Association. So just to give people a concept of, this isn't just some rogue nut job running around out there. This is a person that was in a very prominent position who was doing some very, very evil types of experiments, mind control experiments. And if you want to know more about those experiments and what really goes into mind control, I would recommend doing research into you and Cameron's work.
So let's spell his name. Isn't it Ewen?
Yes, Ewen and Cameron, Cameron.
Yeah, okay. Ewen Cameron.
Yep.
So when you say mind control, you're really talking about trauma-based mind control on individuals, it seems. But is there no such thing as mass mind control?
Oh, absolutely. Yep, there's mass mind control.
So what is that then? I mean, I think the public, that everybody is demonstrating a kind of mass mind control
Well,
because they're not thinking individually.
the example I use is September 11th. That was mass mind control.
And
So
Sandy Hook also.
Sandy Hook, any of these false flags that have gone global or that have impacted and brought the attention of a large mass of people to focus on it.
And how does that work, that mass mind control? It employs fear, obviously.
Right.
And that kicks up those defense mechanisms, and people will take suggestion as to what to do, and they'll take it from the government and the authorities and the agencies because they're collectively fearful now and panicked and horrified. That's the shock and awe.
Exactly. And you just described 9/11 in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this event that took place in 2001. It impacted global consciousness. So it impacted the consciousness of essentially the entire planet. Then the government puts forth, well, look, trust us. We can fix this. We'll protect you. And that's the mass mind control. And many people are, they're still playing by it. They still buy into it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it became part of the national identity.
Right.
By now. It's woven into Americanism. So as a hypnotist or hypnotherapist, which do you prefer? Hypnotherapist, probably.
Hypnotherapist, right?
Yeah. Aren't there methods that you've tried when you interact with the average Joe that don't you play with different ways of communicating just to see if you can bring out a little more comprehension?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of different types of techniques. Yep.
I don't mean with your clients. I mean with people on the street, because we've just discussed why people shut down. And so now I am going to try in my discussions to use some different language and methods if I can think of any, but you are better equipped than I am to do that.
Well, even though I might be better equipped, it's a very, very tough thing to do because the advantage that, as an example, we talked about the media and television has, Sophia, is it's always there. It's
Yes, that's
always there. You and I aren't always there. So we can have a conversation, or we could do a lecture, or we could do a podcast, and it's a moment in time. It's 1 hour, it's 90 minutes, whatever it may be. The key is you have to get people to want to change. You have to get people to want to have to look through a different lens. That's very important. That is so important even with my practice. People have got to want to change. If they don't want to change, then nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. And it's
yeah.
the same thing with the public. The public has to take a step back and say, I want to do something differently. I don't want to operate like this. I don't want to think this way. I don't want to be in fear. So I want to understand more about the truth as an example.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Well,
know it's probably not the answer you were looking for or the audience was hoping for, but it's a very tough nut to break.
I know it's a very tough nut, and we all have been there, and we're all still there, really. So, overall, are you optimistic, or are you one of the pessimists about how this is going to unfold?
What day is it?
It's Tuesday.
Okay, Tuesday, I'm optimistic. Um, that's another really good question. And you know, it's interesting. I ask my guests that question also. I am optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic. It's because I know probably a lot more than most people with regard to the whole trance state and mind control piece that is just all around us, knowing how tough it is to break that. But then I take a step back and I think to myself, we don't need everybody. We just need what I refer to as a critical mass. And I don't know what that critical mass is, but it's a minority of movers and shakers that want to implement the truth and get the lies and the deception out of the way. And that's why the elites, they don't focus on trying to pull the rug out from under the masses. Most people are just doing their thing, you know, and oblivious, most of them, and apathetic to whatever's going on in the world. This is why they will focus their attention on those like yourself or even me perhaps, or even though I'm small potatoes, but you know, some of the bigger names and the people that are doing some really, really unbelievable research and exposing what's going on. That's why they'll go after them, because they realize that what we really need to change things is that critical mass, that minority of people that can pursue the truth and put things back on the right track. So I think that we have to continue to work to do that. Do I think it's going to happen next week? I do not. Do I think it's going to happen in my lifetime? Maybe not. And maybe some folks just put a big frown on their face. But I think, Sophia, that people like yourself and others are setting the table. And it's very important for the younger generation to pick themselves up and to carry the baton. You know, I'm like you. I'm 55 years old. You know, I'm only going to be around for so much longer to be able to do this type of work. It's imperative that the younger folks, the teenagers, the folks in their teens and their 30s and so on, that they get with the program, because otherwise nothing's going to change and it will get exponentially worse.
You know, Mike, I was sitting with a friend, and he has a son who's in his 20s, and he's making, nice money doing some, I don't even know what it is, web programming or something. These new careers they're all kind of nebulous for me. But so the kid is awake. I call him a kid. He's in his 20s. The dad's definitely awake. He's on your level. He has his own podcast. He has his own website, and he's as much of an activist as he can be, and so he's definitely teaching his kids everything that he can. And his son was very affable and congenial and sat with us at the table, and I asked him, so do you think, since you know what you know, do you think that you need to worry, or do you think it's not quite time for you to worry about anything? And I think he was glad that I offered him this multiple choice, And he said, "Oh yeah, I don't think it's time for me yet to worry."
Right.
And there's that time thing again, you know. I should just say, "There is no time, you fool."
Right. Yeah, it's right.
But so he doesn't, he wants to defer the worrying, which is a natural thing. Why he's already, you know, he's right new in his life, moving into his career track. And yeah, he knows the world is a big mess, but he doesn't think, he thinks it's too early for him to worry.
Well, and even if you subscribe to linear time, which we have here, the runway's very short. And it's that dissociation, Sophia, that people have. It's not going to happen to me. This doesn't impact me. And I always say that people really won't wake up until the issues roll up on their doorstep. And I've had this issue, you know, in this conversation with friends and family for years. It looked at me as some kind of nut job, tinfoil hat wearer. And I would say to them, just wait, because it's going to roll up on your doorstep. And when it rolls up on your doorstep, then you're going to understand it. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, it still hasn't happened. I mean, if we take a look at the Boston bombing as an example, I mean, that was the imposition, that was a trial balloon for the military to come in, the militarized police, to impose martial law. And, you know, there were many people in Boston that were, you know, jumping up and down and chanting USA, USA, USA. They were happy the troops were in their armor and their tanks and their Humvees with their weapons and going through the streets.
Yeah,
So
it made them feel safe.
yeah, they believe they, you know, that they're safe, but what they're not understanding is it has nothing to do with your safety. This is a trial balloon. They want to see how receptive the masses are to embracing that kind of presence. And it's conditioning. It's conditioning. So that's why I'm just talking about this, because you asked a question about, am I optimistic or pessimistic? When I see things like that, it doesn't help my optimism.
Yeah.
You know, people waving flags and on the sidelines, their pom poms, and it's like, okay,
Well, they're reacting. They're not. They're not responding individually to what happened. They're simply reacting as a group. And this
right.
is Hollywood. You know, this is the set coming alive. It's now
Yes,
on their streets. It's exciting because that's the other thing. People are, if you are able even to evoke somebody's interest in some of the stuff that you and I talk about to friends who are not awake, I guess, um, they treat it, in my experience, as a form of sort of horrifying entertainment that's there as long as you're there, and then they're willing to listen, but they're kind of relieved when they have to leave or you have to leave, because now they don't have to think about it until they see you next.
right.
And while it's building in their consciousness, it's still not a real part of their lives.
Right. It's like people who rubberneck on the highway and there's a big accident.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Everybody wants to watch the disaster, you know. It's just kind of this weird curiosity that humans have.
yeah. The dread.
Yeah. Yeah. And they just don't attach it to themselves. They just do not believe that, you know, these things are going to actually happen to them. It always happens to somebody else.
Yeah, they're spectators. But we are participants ultimately. I mean, we're all in this world. We're all on this ship together. Our roles all matter. And where we put our energy, I mean, when is my friend's son going to decide that it's time for him to be concerned? I won't use the word worry. Nobody wants to worry, but or to do something, you
Well,
know.
when should he engage?
Well, engage, yeah. When do
Hmm.
you want to participate in this reality rather than moving as fast as you can into, I mean, I think the specter of, okay, let me get rich while I can. Let me get the most out of life. Let me live life to its fullest while I can, and then when I can't anymore, then I'll worry about what I have to do next.
Right. And what they don't understand is that the life that they're chasing, in which, you know, they want to get the most out of it, is the life of the Matrix.
Yes.
That's the
It,
thing. That is the scary part. They're thinking they're successful. Well, you're successful in successfully engaging in the prison that has been constructed for you.
the terms of that prison constitute, and they make up your value system. The fact that you want an unattached house with a 3-car garage, not even a 2-car garage, you know, This is what people want. The
Right.
idea of a lawn, the lawn, front lawn, the green grass was an emblem, a symbol of leisure time and affluence. So everybody has this little patch of green lawn in front of their house today. It's important. It's part of the whole, it's the wrapping.
Well, the thing is, our existence on this planet, if we were true human beings, we would be focused on spirituality. We would be focused on wisdom. We would be focused on our consciousness. We would be philosophers. Instead, we've got a society and a culture that is focused on the things that, you just mentioned, the three-car garage, the big house, the green lawn. I belong to the golf club, the tennis club. I go to a wine drinking club, whatever it may be. And what people don't understand is that that type of existence, you are a shell of a human being. You're not even a human being. You're just I don't know what to call you. I mean, essentially, you're a robot, and you're leading this life of essentially there's very little value to it, very
Well,
little.
you're a product. You're a product of the culture when you become a consumer of the things the culture has to offer, and that's all that you are.
Right.
There's nothing individual about you really that you haven't created very much. I mean, yeah, people don't even cook their meals. They go to stores and the salad is already bagged for them and they can put, cranberries in it and chopped nuts and all they have to do is throw it together the way they assemble their own lives from the prefabbed choices it's all multiple choice.
And those people that identify with their jobs, in other words, their career, their job is their identity. And I find that to be one of the most preposterous ways of thinking, you could possibly bump up against. That without that job, without that career, without that money, or whatever it is, whatever other label you've pinned to yourself, that label of self-importance, that you're a nobody. And that's a very sad thing. A very, very sad thing.
Well, you're proud of your hypnotherapy and your practice and what you're doing for people. So that adds to your self-worth, doesn't it?
It adds to my self-worth, yes, but I am Mike, the human being, first, you
Mm.
see? And I never lose sight of that. I do not go about my life. I spent 32 years in the corporate world, Sophia. And as I spent my time there, there was a lot of very good people there. Don't get me wrong, but you do see the folks that they believe because of their title, because of their pay, that extends that self-importance, that it extends outside the workforce. They
Well,
take that outside. That actually, because of my position in a certain company, that outside the company I hold that same stature. It's ludicrous.
how did you last 32 years?
I basically was my own person. I did my job. I did my job very well, but I worked very hard to foster relationships with people, and I never bought into the saying that they have in the business world, which is a way to segment humanity from this fiction called a corporation, which is they lay people off or whatever it may be, and they say, "Oh, it's not personal; it's just business." you
Mm.
know and that's just another way that you're separating, you're dehumanizing people. That's all it is. And I never subscribed to that. I always embraced people. I worked with them. And and there's a lot of folks in the corporate world that operate like this. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really good people there. But on the other hand, you have that piece of the population which do not operate that way, and the thing is, Sophia, it taught me a lot of lessons. And when I look back at it now, I could say that what I learned there and has really brought a lot of value to me post that career, because now I have a reference point. I have a baseline in which I can look back at, and I just feel like I understand things a little better. When people talk about corporatism and they talk about the corporatocracy, there's a lot of people talking about that. They don't have a clue what they're talking about because they haven't worked at a corporation. Maybe they've read stuff in books and stuff like that. I'm not taking anything away from that, but when you've worked there, you really, really see it.
Now, were you in one corporation for those 32 years or did you move around?
I was in one.
Lucky, that's unusual. That's very unusual, I think.
It was very unusual. I was the last of a dying breed.
Really,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's how it used to be, that, men got a job and they stayed with the company and they worked their way up and they were grateful and they were loyal and the company was protective of them and valued them. So you really had something special, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of who you were. I mean, now I understand a little more about what you said, that you prized and valued certain kinds of a way of being, and that paid off for you, and it kept you secure, maybe, or it fulfilled everything.
It kept me balanced. It kept me grounded. I had a respect for my fellow human being, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there were opportunities that came up, and they would say to me, how would you like this opportunity, or to take this job, that type of thing. There, climbing up the ladder, if you will. And honestly, I rejected some of those opportunities because I did not see them in the same light that they saw them. I didn't want to get caught up in the web. I wanted to be able to have that balance of my personal life. I wanted work-life balance. In the corporate world today, many, many companies are talking about work-life integration, which means your work is your life is your work. It used to be work-life balance. And what they're doing now is the old incremental, tiptoe, just kind of changing things, changing the words around, wordsmithing, and, to the average person sitting in their cubicle somewhere, well, what's the big deal? They just change the words around a little bit. But they don't understand words don't change unless there is action to execute behind it in the corporate world. They just do not change words. Anytime a phrase changes, anytime you see different words on a chart, on a strategy chart, whatever it may be, it's because direction's changing.
Right, like personnel and human resources.
Exactly. Very good example.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Mike, we are at an hour and a quarter now. And
we are. Yep.
We're way past your...
Did I talk too much?
No, your moment when you're going to turn into a pumpkin.
No, I'm good. It was a very good conversation, Sophia.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it, and I think people are going to be very informed by it, and they're going to see television in a whole new way, and maybe their culture and themselves.
Yeah, turn the TV off, folks. Turn it off.
Or turn it on only for short, sessions where you sit there and you attentively analyze and take notes.
That's
if you put a notepad next to the TV, I think that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, many thanks again, and I would love to continue this another time when I get more questions for you and you send me more emails.
All right, Sophia. It was it was great. I loved it.